All right. Good morning, Ms. McDade.
Hey, good morning.
All right. Do you mind starting by giving us your name, your title, and the company you work for?
Sure. Will McDade. I am the Chief Financial Officer at Interstate Batteries here in Dallas, Texas.
Gotcha. And what is your educational background, sir?
So I have an undergraduate degree in accounting from UT Austin, so hook 'em horns. You can see right here. And then I have a master's from the University of Dallas, and it's an MBA, but I have a concentration in accounting as well.
Gotcha.
So it's almost like having two masters, a master's in accounting. It's enough hours to kind of have two.
Yes, sir. Okay. Has education played a big part in your career?
It has. It has, absolutely. I mean, in my profession, you have to have a proper, education and training in accounting to even get started. And so, you can't be an accountant without, being degreed and most of them these days have their masters. When I got my masters, maybe 25% of people had their masters. And I would say in my accounting departments and finance departments, most of the professionals I would say have their masters these days.
Sir.
So either a master's in accounting or an MBA.
Okay. And how
And
long have
so,
you been
so
in your, sir?
I was gonna say, so yeah, and of course that's where you learn accounting. So it's a very specific set of rules and practices, and you have to learn them before you can apply them. And so whether you're in tax or general accounting or cost accounting or whatever it happens to be, you learn a lot of that in undergrad. So you actually learn the fundamentals of how to do accounting, double entry accounting as they call it in college. And
Yes,
so
sir.
that was great. And then in graduate school, it's all about how do you become a better leader? How do you become a better leader? How do you see the big picture? How do you become more strategic? And the great thing about mine, we had a program kind of through Dr. Pepper. The graduate school was close. When I worked at Dr. Pepper for 15 years before I worked at Interstate, and they had a program. I would go over there, and it was close to my work, and Dr. Pepper would pay for it. And I was working, so I could apply the lessons that I had, learned in school at my work, and vice versa. I knew what the professors were talking about because I was dealing with some of the stuff at work, and so that was that's something I tell young people is before you get your master's, at least an MBA, go to work for a few years because you'll get a lot more out of it.
Okay. Gotcha. How long have you been in your current position with Interstate Batteries?
6.5 years. I started in June of 2015, July of 2015. So 6.5 years.
Okay. Have you been the CFO the whole time, the whole six and
I
a half years?
have. I have. Yeah, my last role at Dr. Pepper, I was the senior vice president of finance, which is kind of the number two job. And I was probably tied for the number two job with three or four other people in finance. I'll say it that way. And then I think most of us that were in that role are now CFOs at other companies. And so it's a great stepping stone. And we'll talk later about mentors. But I had a very good mentor at Dr. Pepper, and we're still very good friends. But he actually was very supportive of me, taking the next step in my career, which was awesome. And I try to pay that forward or back or whatever now.
Yes, sir.
My
Okay. Did you ever expect to be a CFO, like while you were going through school?
yeah. So that was kind of so I took a class in high school. I took an accounting class, which was kind of bookkeeping, I'll call it. But I that's when I got interested in accounting, and I was like, hey, I'm pretty good at this, and I like business and money and all that good stuff. So I'm interested in that, and so I was kind of dead set on kind of accounting, and CFO is kind of the best accounting job, I guess. So I was kind of dead set on that from probably age 17 or so,
Oh,
which
wow.
which was great because I talk to people, whether it's in my company or interns or students. I'll give speeches, and I'd say less than half have a really clear idea of what they want to be as their penultimate job or whatever. And I think it's helped me in my career because it's enabled me to say yes, I will do this role because I think it will help me be a CFO.
Okay.
um,
Gotcha.
and so it's been great. And I've been blessed to work for a CFO or similar since I was 24. My second job out of college, I was working directly for a CFO at Dr. Pepper. And so I could kind of see what it was like and see what seemed to be required to be a good one and that kind of thing. So it's been pretty clear to me for a long time.
Yes, sir. Okay. When given the opportunity to be a CFO for Interstate Batteries, were you worried that the job would be a lot to handle?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think my biggest fear, and I think everybody's is there are parts of a job, when you take a new job, there are always going to be parts that you don't know. Right. And so I didn't have a lot of banking experience. I didn't have a lot of, so dealing with credit, dealing with loans, dealing with, those type of things. I didn't have a lot of experience dealing with the board of directors. I'd presented to Dr. Pepper's board a few times in my role, but I'm the secretary of the board at Interstate. So, that's a big part of my job. And so, but any job, you're not going to know every single thing about it because you haven't done it. Right. And so that was probably my biggest fear. And I had a lot of confidence, but that was like, okay, I've got to get that figured out, pretty early. So, the way I've done it is, and I'd recommend this, is I found people who were good at it that were my friends or that I became friends with. And I've got a really good friend who's a fellow CFO in town. And we actually had lunch together last week. And I know a lot about kind of the operations of businesses, especially distribution businesses. And he comes from banking and I come from operations. And so we kind of trade expertise and we'll ask each other questions about things we're facing to help each other out, because you're not born being an expert in everything, and you're not going to ever be an expert in everything.
Right.
You have to live that long. And so I think it's a great way to do it. It's just surround yourself with people, whether it's folks that work for you or friends and peers, or advisors that have a lot of experience in something where you have gaps, and then maybe you can offer, your experience to them in trade.
Yes, sir. Okay. So what's your personal definition of a CFO?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I'm asked that, basically the CFO's role in any company, because it can be a little different in maybe a public company or a private equity company or family owned type company, but really you're trying to create shareholder value. And the way you do that is more profitability, better return on investment. So make your investments in the right places. Just like you would in your own bank, right? I mean, you want more profitability, right? More income, and you want more, smart investments. You don't want to waste your money, and that's a CFO's role. And man, that can take on anything from working with the business to do things smarter around pricing or buying product or developing product or whatever it happens to be. You can also, look at, here are all the different things the businesses are invested in, and make sure you're making smart decisions there, whether it's lines of business or capital expenditures, et cetera. And you really want to make it sustainable. So the companies that are worth the most have the most sustainable income streams. So think of Apple, right? People are very confident Apple is going to be making a lot of money a few years from now. And that's why Apple's stock is trillions of dollars, right?
Right.
And so the same thing. So you're trying to create that long-term shareholder value. And of course, there's you've got the accounting portion of your job, but you're not going to go to the board and go, man, look how great the accounting was this year, right? You're going to talk to them about, the value that was created, for shareholders. And you're going to talk to them about growth, and you're going to, those kind of things. People is obviously the largest part of the job, of any job. But if you have great people, the rest of it pretty much takes care of itself. And so, I always see any job I have is developing and kind of maintaining, a great group of team members, within, whether it's my area or helping my peers with their areas. Because if you have great people, the rest of it gets figured out, because great people are, they'll go create value all day long. And so that's really what we try to do, is kind of acquire and retain the best people.
Yes, sir. How many people do you directly supervise?
I directly supervise 7, and I've got maybe 250 in my, call it, department.
Yes, sir.
So I have finance, accounting, IT, risk management, strategy, and internal audit, and revenue management, which is pricing. So that was my dog, sorry. which is like pricing, pricing to the customers and to our distributors. And
Yes,
so
sir.
between those groups, I have maybe 250. Some of them in IT, sometimes you'll have contractors and full-time team members. So I have some of those are contractors, but pretty large group. And my direct reports are the chief information officer, the controller, the vice president of finance, the vice president of audit. I mean, the director of audit and risk, the director of strategy. What am I missing? I have an executive admin, and then what am I missing? Is that it? And then we also have I have the head of HR that supports me that I deal with on a daily basis, human resources, and some other areas similar to that.
Okay. Okay. What are your job duties?
So on a day-to-day basis, there is no job duty. The job duty is keep everything between the lines. That's
Mhm.
kind of the job, seriously, of a CFO. So you've got to be, I've heard people say you've got to be a little good at everything, just, to put it in layman's terms. But, it could be anything from dealing with the auditors, the external auditors, to pricing, to a strategy. We're going through a couple strategic improvements right now at Interstate. So dealing with that on a daily basis. You may be dealing with people, good thing or bad thing. I spend a lot of time with our, kind of up and comers or really key folks in the business, and spend time with them, figuring out what makes them tick and how we can improve their career. So similar to, I think I said, I've had folks that have really cared about my career. I want to do the same thing for the folks in our business that have, they're key. They've been there a while. They're in a critical role, or man, you see that they're, really an up and comer. I want to spend just a ton of time with them. So I spend probably a fourth of my day doing that kind of thing. And then the rest of it could be anything from a strategy opportunity to pricing, to accounting, to business reviews. We do a lot of business reviews. The best companies do really detailed business reviews every month. And so you'll go through whether it's sales or operations or, whatever it happens to be, and with the operating leaders and go through and talk about what's going on, what can we change, what can we improve. And I spend a few days a month doing that. And the best companies do that, GE in its heyday, or Apple, or, pick a company, Amazon,
Right.
I'm sure, does a really good job of business reviews. And so
Okay.
that's a big part of my job. So
Yes, sir.
if you can imagine the data needed for that, you have to do the accounting right in the first place. So timely, accurate, not a lot of out of period adjustments. And then you've got to do the financial analysis. And we use, these high-end systems, Tableau and Alteryx, and some of these systems that take data from multiple sources. It may be some financial data, some sales data, some data from how many cars are there in a specific city and what percentage do we think we put batteries in, and take all that data, merge it together, pricing data, cost data, and it gives you really, rich information. You're turning data into information. It gives you rich information where you can make decisions and then, make improvements. And the key part of the finance, kind of the financial planning and analysis world, is giving operating leaders the insight they need to make adjustments in a rapid fashion, right? So if I'm like, wow, sales are way down, we need to look at our variable costs, or sales are way up, we need to make sure we're taking as much of that to the bottom line as we can by managing variable costs on the way up, or something like that. Or, hey, it looks like our pricing versus so-and-so is Dr. Pepper, that was a big deal. What's our pricing versus, other pricing? And is that going to mean that our sales are going up or down, or do we need to adjust? And so that is, those are the kind of things that you would look at in a business review, things like that.
Yes, sir. Okay. Okay. Do you mind describing Interstate Batteries, as in what does the firm do exactly, and can you put the size of the company into perspective for people that are watching this interview?
Sure. So we're a 70-year-old company based in Dallas, Texas. Started by a man named John Searcy out of the back of a Studebaker pickup truck, which most people listening to this podcast will not know what that is, but it's a car brand from a long time ago that had pickup trucks. And
Mhm.
he would deliver, batteries to one or two local gas stations. That was back when the gas station would be the one that fixed your car. There wouldn't be general automotive repair back then. Um, and then it started from there. And a man named Norm Miller, who is still our chairman today, started kind of taking it more national and international in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and when it really exploded. And then we started national accounts in the 90s, where we cover all of like the dealerships of large car manufacturers, or we cover very large retail customers. And so we are 2 billion, right at 2 billion in revenue, and we have a couple thousand employees that work for us. And then we have an independent distributor in every zip code in America, and everywhere in Canada as well. And so
That's
we
amazing.
cover, we have coverage, I'll say, of every zip code in the U.S. and Canada. We have about 300, call it, independent distributors across North America.
Gotcha.
We're also in Latin America. That's kind of our three major areas we play.
Yes, sir. Let's see. Okay, as a CFO, what was the proudest moment in your career?
That's a good question. So, I think the proudest moment was actually a role I had at Dr. Pepper. We were in charge of, it was called Rapid Continuous Improvement, which is an odd name, but we were in charge of improving the cash flow of the business by $150 million in 3 years. So this was in late 2010, and the CFO went to Wall Street and said, we're going to improve the cash flow by $150 million a year within 3 years. And we achieved that in 2 years. And it was even on Mad Money. Jim Cramer even put something about it on his show. And so I actually screenshotted that, and I still have it today. So that, I think Cramer talking about maybe work I did is kind of neat as far as, a true work moment.
Yes, sir.
I'll tell you the happiest I've been in my career is when folks that I've worked with in the past will come work with me at Interstate, for example. So Dr. Pepper has been merged into another company now and stuff. So it's not as many of my friends are leading it. So I feel comfortable, if people want to come from Dr. Pepper to work for Interstate.
Okay.
I've had a lot of friends, say, hey, would love to come work with you, that are very, very talented, very sharp people, including our CIO, including my head of finance, and plenty others, and folks that work for them. And that's been really great. As a matter of fact, our chief operating officer came from Dr. Pepper as well. So that's been a lot of fun, because they're good, and and you trust them, and they're going to be good with our culture. And so that's been a lot of fun. That's been very rewarding, because you think, wow, they probably like me as a person, probably think I'm a nice boss or whatever, a good leader. And then also, respect what we're going to do. And so I think that's probably been the most rewarding part of my career. And then just seeing people that, you've known since they were early in their career be successful. So I've got, like I said, friends that are CFOs that, maybe worked for me when they were 25 years old or something like that. And that's really rewarding as well.
Yes, sir. Okay. As a CFO, what has been the hardest moment in your career?
That's a good question. So the hardest moment in my career, is also comes back to people. So I've had times where maybe I've taken over something where the people weren't the right people, or I've made a bad hire or something like that. And that typically disrupts your life more than anything that a natural business factor would do.
Yes, sir.
And I think that, hey, look at football teams or baseball teams or whatever. It's similar, right? I mean, it comes down to people at the end of the day.
Yes, sir.
And so, my lesson learned in all of that is probably, first of all, spend a lot of diligence when you're hiring somebody that you don't know, or when you take something over, spend a lot of diligence understanding people and the culture, and give them strong feedback and solid feedback when necessary. And then don't be afraid to make a call if it's not the right fit, because they'll be happier at the end of the day, and so will you, and so will your team. You owe it to the rest of your team think about on a baseball team when there's a knucklehead that's, driving everybody crazy. And if the manager doesn't do anything about it, then then the team manager kind of loses the team. Right. And so how do you, I know you're a basketball player, so similar in basketball, right? So making sure you try as hard as you can not to have that on your team. But if you do, how do you deal with it? First with feedback, but if the feedback doesn't work, how do you deal with it by making, strong, smart decisions in a relatively quick manner?
Yes, sir. All right. During your career, what is a talent that you discovered that you did not know that you had?
Boy, that's a good question. I'll tell you something that's helped me a lot in my career that is a talent that maybe I didn't know I had or probably didn't have when I was a young person is developing the proper relationships at a kind of personal / business level with people. It could be team members, it could be vendors, it could be the board, it could, whatever it is, kind of a mutual respect / friendship. Because there's always going to be times that aren't in a book, right? There's times that something weird happens that you need to help each other out, and you're going to ask them to scratch your back, and then maybe you'll need to scratch their back later on, right?
Yes, sir.
Having those relationships with peers as well, with your boss, having those relationships is very critical, and it's a professional relationship, but there's also a kind of a mutual admiration that creates, that allows you to have tough conversations. It allows you to deal with issues in a better way, a way that works best for both parties. And so I think that's something I've learned. I don't know if it's something you learn, I think, as you get all these gray hairs, is that's really important. And so I wish I'd have known that 20 years ago, but I didn't. So but it's a good lesson.
Yes, sir. Okay. During your career, what is a skill that you thought was underdeveloped?
That's a good question. Underdeveloped. I think up until maybe 10 years ago, I think the people side, you hear me talk a lot about people.
Yes, sir.
When I was a younger manager, I think I was a lot more, call it command and control. And that's super common, by the way. You don't really know what you're doing, right? And so I got promoted to vice president at age 30, which was probably too young. I was capable from a skills perspective, but I didn't quite know how to deal with people appropriately.
Yes, sir.
And so I was probably a little too command and control. And luckily they stuck by me, because the most of the folks that work for me were 15, 20 years older than me. And a couple of them are some of my best friends today. But I didn't know how to, kind of set a clear vision, and then let them go drive what they want to drive, and then support them, and check in, and those sorts of things, but not like, hey, let's meet every single day and talk about every single thing you did yesterday. And that's an environment that may work with a small team. It's
Mhm.
not super great anyway, but it may work okay with a small team, but it's not successful when you're leading, experienced, seasoned executives. They do not want to be led like that. And so I think it's taken me though until I was probably 35 until I figured that out. Sometimes the easy way, sometimes the hard way, with some good feedback from my bosses and some feedback from the folks that work for me.
Yes, sir.
And so, yeah, I wish that's something for some reason you just don't learn until you get a little gray. But I wish I'd have known that, when I was 25.
Yes, sir. Okay. If you could give advice to your 18-year-old self, what would you say?
That's a good question. Well, I've got a 13-year-old son, so I can kind of give him that advice today. But I think enjoy it along the way as much as you can, because I'm 46, so when you're 46, you're starting to look back more than you're looking forward, probably. And enjoy it as much as you can. Make as many friends as you can along the way. Have a great time. Smell the roses. That kind of thing. I think a lot of people are thinking that right now during COVID and all this craziness we're going through. But there's, looking back on it, so much fun, so many good friends. But just stop and smell the roses once in a while, because you get so focused on whatever you're working on that day, work wise. And I think when I had my son, it gave me some perspective. I think I was 100% hard charging work, traveled 100% of the time, all this and my son was born. I think that gave me a level of perspective. And I just think the older and more kind of settled you get
Yes,
that
sir.
perspective, but then it's too late. So maybe when you're 18, you should, but in general, what I tell my son is, man, if you get a good education, if you work hard, do what your boss tells you to do, show up, be ethical, things will typically work out really well. You may not be the CFO, but things will work out where you end up with a really rewarding career. And by the way, being the CFO it's not guaranteed happiness.
Right.
It's really there. I tell you, I have folks that work that I've worked with in the past that haven't come anywhere near CFO in their career, and they're the happiest, most blessed people with wonderful families, and so it's not necessarily what exact title you get to. It's more about happiness and just being kind of well rounded and growing a great family and that kind of thing. If that's what you choose to grow a family and that kind of thing. Just
Okay.
but hey, hard work and good education and do what your boss tells you to do is pretty good advice at all times.
Yes, sir. Can't go wrong with that,
And
huh?
if you're 13, do what your dad tells you to do would also be good advice for all those 13-year-olds out there.
Okay. So, who has been an inspiration or a mentor in your life?
Good question. So I've got so professional. I have a couple of mentors, and then personal. So personal, I'll start out with my folks died when I was young. So I have an older brother though who's 9 years older than me, and he's kind of been my personal mentor. So he's a great family man. He's an Apple exec, great family man. Been at Apple for 20 years, so he's doing okay. And wonderful kids. Love my nieces, and he's got a wonderful wife, great family. And so I think he's been a great personal mentor. We're best friends. We talk every day. I've got a place down south by right next to him and where he lives, and go down there all the time visiting. And so he lives in the hill country in Texas. And so personally, absolutely my brother. And he probably say the same thing about me. I mean, I think we both again, there's stuff he's good at. He's a sales leader, so there's stuff he's good at that I'm not, and vice versa. Although he's really good with his finances as well. But we talk a lot about work and of course personal lives and whatever else. Business wise, two leaders. One, both at Dr Pepper, because that's when I was young, and so one was the head of operations. And so actually the way I got to be an executive was I was in finance for a few years, and actually left Dr Pepper for a couple of years and went into the RV business and got into operations there. And actually a really good friend of mine is the guy that ran operations there, and we're still really good friends. He's a CFO now. And when I learned operations, the head of operations at Dr Pepper, who I'd gotten to be friends with when I worked in finance, called me and said, "Look, why don't you come over here? We're about to buy some plants and close some plants and that kind of thing. And you'd be great at it because you'd know all the math on which one should we buy and which one should we close. And I'll even let you go close them and go buy them and whatever." Right. Um, and so that's when I got promoted to VP when I was 30, which, like I said, I was too young to be leading a lot of people, but I was good at that job. I was good at
So,
doing the math and traveling around, and I could, it wasn't the parts of it weren't fun. Parts of it were super fun. Parts of it weren't fun. We put in some systems to track things better and different things. So I was actually in manufacturing at the time. I was doing manufacturing plants. So it was a great way to learn business. But his name's Derry Hobson, and he was my mentor. We're still really good friends. So he was almost like a father figure to me. He's 71 now, I think. So he was about my age when I was young. So when I was 22 or whatever, starting at Dr Pepper, he was late 40s. And so I've known him that long. And then he's the one that actually said, "Hey, you're fine in supply chain." I was kind of VP of supply chain, and he's like, "You're fine in supply chain, but man, you're such a good finance guy. You need to go back into finance at some point." Um, so I did, and I was kind of floundering a little bit in finance at Dr Pepper for a couple of years. I was doing fine. I was running one of our divisions, but it was nothing to write home about. And so, but then we had a new CFO come in, so they made a change in CFO. And when the new CFO came in, Marty Ellen, who's my second mentor, he came in and he was just an absolutely brilliant CFO. And if you go look at Dr Pepper's stock price between 2010 when he started and 2018 when they sold it, you'll see that it went up like 8 times. It went from $20 to 120.
Wow.
That's 6 times, but I mean, it was down low, even below 20. But he created all this wealth and all this value for the shareholders of Dr. Pepper, and he's very, very well regarded, kind of a legend. But he was my personal mentor. He taught me a lot about, like I said, managing senior executives. He taught me a lot about finance and just being around him, kind of osmosis, because he was so smart. And then he's the one that taught me this rapid continuous improvement that we talked about. That it's lean is the term, and
Yeah.
in kind of generic terms. So he taught me lean and taught me how to go out and implement and execute that. And we go around and give speeches on that today because Dr. Pepper had such a great run. So we give a speech twice a year at SMU and a few other places, and have a blast. And we play golf together all the time. And so he's retired now, but he's a very good mentor of mine, and certainly get advice from him quite often. But those are probably my two great business mentors, Derry and Marty. And they're very different people. They'll tell you they're very different people, but they're one's in operations, one's finance, and different leadership styles, but both very effective and great mentors to me, and I love them, and they're awesome.
I gotcha. All right. And my last question is for the high schoolers and college students that are watching this interview. What advice would you give them if they want to be aspiring executives?
Yeah, really good question. So education, number one. So I would say that to every kid. I know sometimes now you hear maybe it's not the major thing. I see some of that, and I do disagree with that. So I say education, number one. Do well in school. Do well. Like I say, I got a 13-year-old, and so it's like do well in school starting then, because that'll matter. It's gonna always build on itself. And so maybe you don't know why learning algebra 1 is so important, but when you're in calculus, you'll know why algebra 1 was so important.
Right.
Or when you're taking your SATs, you'll know why algebra 1 was so important. And
Hmm.
so get into as good of a college as you can. It's not the be all end all, but if you can get into a good college, it's a great start because they're going to have great firms recruiting from them, especially in my field in accounting. UT is the #1 accounting program in the country, has been for 40 years. And so everybody and their dog was recruiting from UT. I mean, it was just, everybody wanted us. And so that was great. And to this day, I mean, we recruit at UT, and it's the same thing. You're battling with every giant company in the world for those couple hundred kids.
Right.
And then, so I think that's a big deal. And then start at the top as far as companies go, and kind of work your way from there. Because what happens is smaller companies want to hire people that were successful at larger companies, right? And so maybe the Amazon regional guy becomes the CEO of a smaller company. You know what I mean? And because they're like, wow, you learned how Amazon works or how Dr. Pepper works or whatever it is. So if you're in accounting, I would say start at one of the big accounting firms. I actually did not do that. I started at a smaller accounting firm, and I started in tax. Figured out fairly quickly I didn't love tax, but and moved into something else. But I would say start at one of the big accounting firms. There's the big four, and then there's a couple others that are also good firms.
Yes, sir.
I think that's a great way to start your career. And you'll either figure out that you love doing that or you don't after 3 or 4 years. And if you don't, there's lots of companies that'll hire you. And so every company wants one of those folks. And so I think that's just a great way to start your career. And then go get your master's and and then learn how to be really good with people, because that's the job after you're about 10 years in. The job's really all about people. It's not really about being the best accountant or whatever anymore.
All right. All right. That's it for my question. Do you have anything else left to say for the people watching the interview?
No, I appreciate it, Key. And for everybody, Key actually tutors my son in math, and that's the way I know him. So he's great with kids. So I highly recommend him for tutoring or probably basketball coaching or whatever else that you'd like for him to do. But yeah, absolutely, man. I appreciate it. And this is great. It's great to share old man knowledge with kids. And so I appreciate it, and hope everybody has a wonderful and safe and healthy 2022.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. Same to you.
All right. Thanks, Keith. Take care.
Yes, sir. You too. All right.